Live on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook. Welcome to Unmuted Conversations, a brand new series that I'm starting live stream. We are just going with the flow, and hopefully all of the tech is working. I can see on my other screen, it looks like it's started. There's a bit of a delay, but hopefully any of you watching live will enjoy this conversation that I'm having today. This is just the beginning of a large series that I'd like to start. We'll probably convert this into a podcast as well, and we're streaming it on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn right now. And you can ask your questions in the chat, and I hope that I will be able to see them on my side. Some of the platforms you might need to give permission so that we can see your name on our side. But Unmuted Conversations is really a series just to continue the message of my new book, Unmuted, where we can share stories about unmuting ourselves or others in the world. So the first guest that I want to introduce all of you to is someone who has been very important in my life these past months. This is the creative director and founder of Amplify Studio, which is the studio that I hired to help me put together the book launch of Unmuted. And they have played an immense role in shaping the launch event that we did. For those of you who were there a couple of weeks ago, it received immense feedback from people saying what a unique event it was, how real it felt, although it was virtual. And so I've brought on the brainchild of this event, who is Rahina Gajjar, and she is the creative director and founder of Amplify Studio. And she's just going to share with us today. I wanted to bring her on first so you could meet her. So many of you have asked me about my book launch, about how we did it, where the ideas came from, why it was so unique and different. So I wanted you to be able to meet her and hear directly from her how we went about this. But more than that, I wanted you to hear her story and how she has put together a very diverse team of people all over the world who are very incredibly innovative, and how they share their ideas together and some of the techniques she uses to bring her team together. So with that, let me welcome onto my virtual unmuted stage. I'm going to unmute her right now. Rashina, hello. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I'm so excited about this conversation.
Me too. You know, we've been talking about this for so long that we wanted to do this, and I wanted to introduce you to my network and tell people a lot about you. I guess first, could you just give us an introduction, a short introduction as to who you are, where you're from, where you are now, and your career up to this point?
Okay, so I'm Rashina. Hello, everyone. I am the founder and CEO of Amplify Studio, which is a creative studio led by diverse, colorful women from different countries around the world. We do various different initiatives. So most recently, we worked on Heather's virtual book launch, which was an incredible experience. We also do social media, copywriting, creative direction, brand building, a lot of the things really that are necessary to amplify brands in today's society. And the reason that we do what we do is we're very much rooted in the brands of today representing themselves in a way that can truly resonate with today's multicultural, multidimensional society, which is something that I noticed personally whilst I was doing work with VMware and the United Nations in my kind of early career, that this was really very much missing in the way that brands were showing up today. So that was something I decided I wanted to change. And I founded the company a year ago. We were extremely lucky to have so many incredible clients. And I think the work that I had previously done with entrepreneurs around the world within the context of my UN consultancy actually really helped to already pave the path for this studio. And so now we work with companies in various different geographical regions, and we have a distributed team of women in different countries, all with kind of colorful roots, as we like to call them. So we have some women who are from Asia originally, we have some women who are living around Europe, and we also most recently have welcomed 2 new women from Central America.
Wow, I love that. And that's what I really liked. I remember when I met you, I mean, just to let everyone know that story, Rashina's team had actually contacted me because they were organizing an event for another client that, and they wanted me to be on a panel. And so they contacted me. We were having this interview, and I'm so impressed by Rashina that I finally say, wait, do you do book launches? How can we work together? Because I loved your energy. I loved your mission in the world to amplify voices, which is so similar to Unmuted. And I really appreciated how diverse your team was and what you were able to bring to the table. So how did you find this team? I mean, how did you bring all these people together? Where did you find them? You are all over the world, literally. I mean, we have, Andy and who else is in Philippines? You have two people in
Kara's in
Philippines.
the
Yeah,
Philippines.
Kara and you have Preeti in the UK, and you're sitting in Spain. And I mean, how did you find everybody?
So it was kind of an interesting story. I didn't intentionally want to go so far out, but I knew that I didn't want to be limited by geographical restrictions because, when I started my career, I worked at a creative agency in Luxembourg, and then I moved away from Luxembourg to complete my degree, and I ended up, freelancing for them. So I already had a taster of what does it look like to work remotely and how can that work within a creative capacity. Then when I started working in corporate sales, we were working in virtualization and digitization of companies. So I already had in my mind, wait a minute, this is the future. Companies all around the world are starting to change their very infrastructures to accommodate more digital workforces. And then when I started working with the United Nations and we were working with women all the way over in Central America, that was my first taste of, wow, it's very much possible to impact brands and businesses whilst being in a completely different country. And so it's not necessary for me to have a team that's exactly in the same location as me if we're doing this level of creative digital work. So then when I started hiring my team, I had very clearly in mind that I only wanted the very best people. And I knew that on some level that would mean accommodating extremely diverse perspectives from different cultures. I think that if you really want a level of output that is really next level, you can't just limit yourself to what you already know and what you've already been around. So, from my history of traveling and living in lots of different countries, 6 to date, I kind of thought, well, why would I be closed-minded to women living in other countries and geographical vicinities when in fact I've already seen in my own experience that that can almost be more of an advantage than a disadvantage when
Yeah,
it comes to creating powerful work.
definitely. Wow. So did you put out an open call for people to apply, or you knew these people from before, or how did you find them?
So I was really investigative around how I found the people in my team. I think that I have really good standards when it comes to people. I think I really know how to identify the potential of a person and how willing they are to actually work towards that potential, which you and I have spoken about, right? There is a distinction between having lots of potential and actually moving in the direction where you want to explore and look at what does that actually, how does that look for me to walk in the path of my potential. So I did a lot of different things, to be honest. I didn't just put out an ad. I think that I must have been a recruiter in my past life because I literally scoured the internet for these people. I mean, I was in Facebook groups, I was in Slack channels, I was asking people for recommendations, I was cold outreaching to people on LinkedIn and on Clubhouse at the time, RIP. I was literally I was literally going everywhere. And I have this thing, and I'm sure that this won't work for everyone, but if I see someone's face, I already get a distinct impression of like who they are. And I'm very good at reading people's faces. So I would go, and if I saw a photo of someone and I thought, I'm getting a really good feeling about them, I would reach out to them and I would have an interview with them. And I had, for every position in this team, and I think we're at 8 now, I must have had at least 20, 30 interviews per person. So, and that's not counting the amount of people that I reached out to. And it happened in a very serendipitous way, I must say, because there comes a level of activity of outreach that you reach where it doesn't really it becomes almost like a manifestation process where the person that you end up with, they could come in literally through the bathroom window at this point. So for me, I remember Andy, who's our chief storyteller. I saw her face, not in a crowded room, but across a Slack channel, and I thought, oh my God, I'm having so many interviews, but I'm going to hold out to have this interview with this woman. And I remember when I had the interview with her, it just kind of clicked. And that's one thing that I would say is really important that I think a lot of companies are missing out on when they do hire their original core team is they don't hold out for the right person. They just try to find someone that's good at the job. But for me, I wanted people who not only would be exceptional at the job, but actually were incredible people that I would be proud to introduce my clients to, that I would be proud to be spending so much time of my life working alongside. So that's where I took a kind of a very much manifestation oriented approach to finding the right people, and I spread myself everywhere. And then I was extremely discerning with, okay, I'm going to interview everyone, but the last person that makes it across the finish line has to be someone who's really, truly exceptional in a way that really moves me.
Right. And they really are exceptional. I mean, everyone on the team contributes in their own special way, and they're all just such high level people. And tell me more about the mission, and the big why that you have brought everyone together, and they're very much on the same page. I mean, your whole team knows 100% where you're going with your clients. And what is this mission that you have for Amplify?
Okay, so the mission was very much born out of my own personal journey. I have lived in many countries around the world. I've lived in the UK, in Luxembourg, and Ireland, in India, in France, and now I'm based in Valencia, in Spain. And I speak three languages. I speak English, French, and Spanish, and actually a little bit of Gujarati, which is my mother tongue as well. So moving around to all these different countries, I began to notice how much of an outsider I would feel and how I did not feel represented by, any of the kind of the brands, the media, anything that was going on, really. I was very much feeling like the other. And so that's something that I kind of always had, that I carried with me. And then as I started working in sales and in digital marketing and social media, that's where I really started to notice, wait a minute, this same feeling is something that is not just me that's having this feeling, but as our society becomes a global society, there is a certain demographic of voices that is still not being represented. And those are the voices of, men and women of color from different countries. Also, I know that you do a lot of work in this, people whose first language is not English. There's so much kind of that's being put out there at the moment that is not really resonating with the next generation of consumers, people who are like me and my team. And I really noticed this very early on because I was working in corporate sales, and I noticed that there were so many things that companies and brands were not doing. And it was so obvious to me because I had already worked in digital marketing for companies like Nestlé and L'Occitane en Provence. I had written copy for those brands. So I already knew a lot about the ecosystem of branding. Right. And so when I started to notice this, and that gap only grew wider, that's when I thought, okay, I need to do something about this. And with the team and the work that we're doing, we really believe that as much as it's become a very clear focus of the brands of today to speak to this next generation of consumers, they don't know how to do it. And that's because they don't come from that demographic. They don't have the lens, the experience, the culture, that deep-rooted understanding that comes from having a colorful perspective. And so we really wanted to bring that to the table in a way that is still aligning with business objectives and still aligns with the direction and the nuances of the brand, but actually leads them in a direction where they can do things that have never been done before, that really resonate with this growing consumer base of people who want to be seen and heard and simply aren't resonating.
Yeah. And that's amazing. And I think that's why I wanted to work with you specifically, because our our views of the world and the voices that we want to hear are so similar, right? That we want to unmute them and amplify them and give platforms for people to speak up and be seen in the world. And I think that's really what you're doing with Amplify, is you're helping thought leaders, brands, consultants, wide range of different types of people to just show up as their higher self in that sense, right?
Yes. And I think that there's something very special about having a core team of women that helps people to really come out of their shell, because you're giving them a level of support and a kind of the diversity level of that support as well, right? So it's coming from a place of people who can hold the space because they understand different cultures and perspectives, and they're still all coming together to help this uplifting and amplifying process. And I've noticed that that has really helped to unblock and release a lot of the misaligned facets of brands and entrepreneurs in the way that they're showing up online. So I do think that the fact that we're so diverse and so passionate really plays a big role in that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's absolutely true for your team. Um, I know that there are a lot of people who will watch this and are very interested in hearing a bit more about what we did around the Unmuted book launch. So can you kind of walk them through? I'll let you tell it because you're better than me. But do you want to tell everyone sort of what the process was like? The steps that you took me through, because I think that our working together in a sense was unmuting me even more than writing the book. So yeah, I'll let you tell the story, and I have control over the mute button if I think you're telling too much. But no, I'm an open book. I'm happy to share. But why don't you kind of walk people through what that process was like, and what we did, and your thought process along the line of how this event should work, kind of the behind the scenes, from your behind the scenes as well, of what you did with your team to create this.
So, first of all, I think that when we first met, that was kind of you expressing the desire to amplify and to unmute, with possibly even against your knowledge, because you wanted a book launch, but you also knew that you wanted more than a book launch, and there was that desire for more that was there, but it was still unexpressed to a very large degree. So then when we started exploring, okay, what would that look like and how could we do it, there was a lot that came to the surface there, a lot of questions, a lot of thoughts, also a lot of desire for more. That I think that's what really went into the process of the book, is you knew that you wanted to amplify yourself and the work that you were doing. There was some awareness of the need to unmute. And then when we really started to work together, that's when we noticed, okay, we're going to have to go very deep into, who you are as a person, what your story is, why you wrote Unmuted, what your intention is behind this book, how we want to truly represent the character and the values behind the book in how the book is released into the world. And that journey, the preamble to actually creating and launching the book launch, I think was just as important, because it helped us to really examine very important details behind who you are as a person and what needed to be drawn from that in the creation of the book, and what was also strategic for your brand and what made sense on that front too, because as much as you want to put all of yourself in things, sometimes it doesn't make sense. So we also had to learn those boundaries and distinctions. So initially what we did is we had I think a couple of months possibly of going
6 weeks, I think, at least, yeah, of conversations, right?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how many weeks, but it was definitely several
Yeah.
weeks. And we went into, so we had a personal branding session with you where we tried to kind of look at how you were already showing up and what needed to be brought out of your personal story and what your audience needs to be hearing about that in the lead up to the book launch. We also had a storytelling session where we looked at your personal story and the details from your own background that were important and that shouldn't be neglected, because in my experience, entrepreneurs often neglect the most poignant details of their story. And so
And
we
that was
really,
interesting because, stories that came up in our conversations that I hadn't thought about for years, and you guys would be like, oh, you have to tell that story. And I'm like, why? Like, will people really care about that? What does that have to do with anything? And you were able to see that and pull it out of me and say, no, this is why. And that really resonates. And so many people will understand that in a different way. And I thought that was really interesting, kind of that process of just having me tell those stories. Yeah.
yeah. And I think in my experience, one of the things that I've noticed is we are very selective with the brands and entrepreneurs we work with because we want to work with people who are doing really important work in the world that directly benefits society. But what I've noticed is those are actually the brands and entrepreneurs that need the most amplifying because they're so being so careful to not be too loud, which is one of the concepts you talk about in your book.
Yeah.
So when we went through this process together, it was very interesting to see that, wait a minute, this book is so important for the world to have, for people to have in their hands, and it's going to change lives. I think it probably already has changed lives since it's already launched. But Heather needs to unmute different parts of herself and understand that that is directly going to influence this impact, and we have to kind of find out what those pieces are. So that was very much an unmuting process, just looking at those little details in your story that you thought maybe someone doesn't want to hear this, and actually through having that sounding board of various different voices and perspectives, we realized actually these are points that would resonate. So that was what we did initially. And then we came to, what are we going to do for the book launch? And that was kind of an odyssey of different questions and thoughts and ideations and brainstormings and strategy sessions.
And this is the first time you did a book launch, isn't it? I mean, you hadn't done an actual book event before. So, I mean, this was just pure, innovation from your team at this stage, right?
Yes, and one of the things that I did very early on is I asked the team to all read the book. So we had this like kind of copy that hadn't been released, and we all read that copy of the book.
And I was so impressed. I showed up for one of the calls, and it was obvious everyone had read it, and I'm like, they were able to quote from it. I thought, wow, you really took this seriously. Okay, but it was excellent because you had such a deep understanding, and you also learned my voice in a very special way. You really got to know me and the way that I write and my style, the way I communicate. And I think that was really beneficial too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that having everyone read the book and also study the book in many ways. There were several team members who were so passionate about it that I didn't even ask them to, but they just started like making so many notes and having so many ideas just based on like, the way that they were intensely kind of absorbing it. And I think that was so necessary because you can't work on something you're not passionate about. If you haven't read the book, how are you going to know how it's going to impact people and whether which parts to draw out. So that was a really important step in the process, was everyone reading the book, having many conversations around what that looks like. And because the team they all have different levels of expertise, so they're all doing different things, we brought in so many different perspectives in those brainstorming sessions, from the personal branding front to the creative direction to the storytelling to social media. There was so much that melded together really beautifully during those kind of brainwave sessions. And then we kind of slowly, it's almost like how Michelangelo chiseled David out of the marble, right? And I don't want to be kind of too liberal in calling it a masterpiece, but it's kind of the process of what it looked like, right? Was us kind of chiseling away at this and seeing, okay, what can we create that would really impact people, and how can we do it in a way that is true to Heather's values and doesn't kind of, and I remember this is something that you said very early on, your mission is to unmute other people and to not be on the stage saying, everyone, like, look at me, and like, so that was something really important to you. So we wanted to make sure that experience of the launch was congruent with that intention. So, gradually the launch started to take shape, and then we went through the visual side of things and how to interpret it visually without straying too much from the identity of the book. And so we worked with our sister studio in Portugal, Trapper Studio, to kind of create that identity. And then there were so many different details to the actual pulling together of the launch experience. But I think that's where actually having a very multicultural, diverse team was very helpful, was there were so many different talents and skill sets for different facets of the launch. So even though we hadn't done it before, the fact that we were this just kind of like extremely motivated, passionate team really went to our credit at that point and helped fuel a lot of those details being taken care of.
Yeah. And how is it working behind the scenes? Because I know every call that we had, and we had many, many calls. I mean, there were times we were having calls at least 6 hours a week. And what was happening after that? Does everybody sit down and actually watch all those videos again? And I mean, how many hours were you spending on top of the work that we were doing that I was physically involved in?
Yeah. It was actually a huge amount of work. I think the main reason that it was
She doesn't get paid enough, you guys. She doesn't get paid enough.
It's something that this project in particular, we took it on because we wanted to do it. We did have a lot of other stuff going on, so it was a big. I think the biggest challenge was the time frame, because we already had a lot of huge projects that were going on in the sidelines, and so we had to kind of like squeeze this time out of our own calendars. And again, we just really wanted to work on it, and I just love your mission. I love Unmuted, and so we wanted to make that happen. But essentially what we did was, from the very beginning through to the book launch, every time we would have a conversation with you, there were, on the back of that one conversation, hours and hours and hours of preparation and internal meetings, internal brainstorming sessions, creation, putting things together as well. So actually synthesizing, because it's not the same doing a brainstorming and then actually selecting which ideas are meant to rise to the surface. So there was a lot of curation. And then obviously we came up into those meetings with you, and there were so many different facets of the launch to take care of that we might have had 3, 4, 5 meetings about different things, that each of those meetings had hours that went into preparing them, so that we could have that 1 hour conversation that wouldn't be 6 or 7 hours. So from that perspective, it was a lot of preparation and work. I would say that a lot of the work that we've done in the past has helped us pave the way for doing something in such a short period of time. But it was just a function of the fact that we were very luckily very busy, and we had a lot of work going on behind the scenes. So yeah, it was tremendous. But I must say that having a team that is working in different geographical regions is very helpful in those situations.
Yeah. Actually, the time zones helped. You guys, it felt like you were working 20 hours a day just on my project, because we would have our friends in the Philippines were up at my time, and then it would continue, and you'd be up around 2 p.m. my time, and then you'd continue it into the night until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning my time or later. And so it felt like there was this around the clock progression happening. I think you use your team really well in that sense of delegating and then getting the projects and tasks done to fit my time zone, so that when I was awake and operating, you were able to get in touch with me and I could approve, and we could have those short conversations, because we were in pretty much constant contact for the 2 months leading up to the launch, probably. Yeah. So I mean, I think you made such a good point earlier when you were talking about how people who really do have big messages, who are doing really important things, that they always are so worried about being too loud. And I think that was definitely the case for me. And I found myself actually apologizing to people about my LinkedIn feed over the past 6 weeks, right? Like, I know, I'm sorry. Everybody comes up to me, Heather, you are everywhere. Like, you are top of my feed on every channel I open. And oh my gosh. And they're excited about it. And they're being very congratulating me about that. But at the same time, I have that that pang of embarrassment of I'm so sorry, I'm so loud, I'm everywhere. And how do you deal with that? I mean, I guess that's just one challenge of, and it's funny, you know, it's so ironic. I wrote the book Unmuted, and yet I myself have that feeling of, oh, it's just too much. Like I'm even tired of hearing about myself. Um, how do you approach this with your clients? I mean, I think you were very delicate in handling it with me, but I assume I'm not the only one that has this kind of challenge. So, how do you help people to unmute and handhold them through that?
So I think one of the things that I have noticed is that the mission that we have as individuals who are impact driven, often ties to our own personal experiences in that
Mm,
specific realm. So, for example, Amplify, there were many times where I felt kind of squished into a box
mhm.
by various individuals and societies. And so that was something that was important to me. And Unmuted, Muted is the same thing. So the first thing I think is very much understanding deeply why people do the things that they do, why they're in the line of work that they're in, and being understanding and kind of delicate about how you approach that. Because if you have spent so many years of your life feeling muted and you even wrote the book on it, then unmuting you would not be a case of, okay, Heather, you're going to get up and talk about this now. You know, there is something there. There are things that are holding you to those specific kind of patterns and beliefs. The other thing is, I am a belief coach. I learned how to do belief coaching actually during the pandemic. So it's something that I bring into my work very subtly. I mean, you and I haven't even
You do
had
it very subtly. You do it very subtly. But I can remember at times feeling like, gosh, I mean, I don't even need a coach because I have Rashina. Like, she's just coaching me through all of this, you know. And so I felt like it really did feel like a coaching process to open me up to these new ideas and kind of, you know, pull me along and get me to step into something new. And I found that really interesting. I mean, I learned a lot in this process. It was so much more that I came to you to launch a book, you know, and it ended up being this huge thing. Okay, so sorry to interrupt you there, but that
no, but
coaching bit is important.
it's interesting hearing your perspective on this, because I definitely am aware of it. And I think it's because we also have this craftsman approach. You know, the way that we amplify brands is deep rooted. You can't ignore what has gotten them to where they are and why, and what is holding them to that current place. And that approach is something I haven't really seen in this industry, but it's really important, because if you're a brand or an entrepreneur and you want to start showing up differently, there's a reason you have to acknowledge that you are in your current place. And often it is very uncomfortable to get to the next place. And so that's why I think we are very careful with how we do it, but we do hold this space. We do a lot of holding the space for brands and entrepreneurs. And I do think that in that situation, getting you to that place was, you know, firstly, just understanding that you wanted to be there, but that it was necessary in order for you to be willing to do that, for you to see yourself and some of the things that were coming up for you in a safe environment. So, you know, we did have a couple of sessions that were much more oriented towards that side of things. And this is something that does happen with pretty much anyone that we work with, is that process. Because, you know, being a good entrepreneur and being good at what you do is great, but sometimes it's so necessary for someone else to hold the space for you as you're holding the space for other people. You know, this is why coaches have coaches. And I think that the work that we do is very intentional about that, so that, yes, you came to us for a book launch, but we're going to make sure that the impact that you're creating and showing up and creating that book launch is lasting. And it's not just, I put together this great event, but everyone forgot about it and nobody thought about it 2 weeks later. You know, I think that a lot of the process that goes into creating something lasting is, you know, looking at what are those levers that are holding in place a reality that no longer serves your business. So
Right.
that is something that we do tend to go into.
Yeah. And I think that's what really makes a difference in it, right? Because in order to unmute, to amplify, to step into that larger space and take more space in the world, there are those barriers, right? And I didn't realize that. I honestly didn't even realize it going into this process, but they definitely came up because I can remember so many times in conversations like, Oh my gosh, like these light bulb moments of I had no idea I was thinking like that, you know? And so it was that really that coaching process that I think you were able to take me to the next step. What do you see other kinds of challenges? I mean, I'm an individual entrepreneur, but if you're dealing with larger brands or teams, what other kinds of challenges do you face in unmuting and amplifying companies and brands?
I think one of the biggest challenges is it's okay. So I'll give you an example from popular culture, which I think is kind of an inflammatory one. Kim Kardashian recently spoke about how people need to just work. They need to
Mm.
just stop complaining and go out there and work. And she came
Hustle.
under so much, exactly. And she came under so much fire because people were so upset and angry about the fact that she said this because she has grown up in a kind of a specific bubble
Mm.
that is not aligned with the majority of the population. So the common critique was, you are so alienated from the everyman or every woman that you are saying this without thinking about how this is landing with the single mom of three who is
Mm.
hustling to try and make things work in her life and is not able to get anywhere because whatever ecosystem she's a part of is not supporting that. So I just to take that as a metaphor, the the reason that most brands are actually struggling with resonance is that same reason. Is they're so far alienated from, for example, why that customers originally loved them, or who the customers are today that need to hear what they have to say, and what specific angle to say so that people feel seen and that they can resonate, instead of this brand has just launched another deaf campaign, or this brand is trying to recoup their reputation after showing up with something that was completely off par. There is that just kind of like dissonance, I would say, between the way that brands are showing up today and the way that people expect to interact with their favorite brands and how they expect and yearn to be seen. So I would say with larger companies and organizations, that's a bigger challenge than with entrepreneurs. Often with entrepreneurs, it is more of the unmuting, amplifying process, and really identifying also strategically what are the stories, what is the positioning, how can you do this in a way that aligns with who you are. But with brands, it's very much that lack of back and forth between the brand that has created some product that is commercially successful and the way that that is received in society by people who constitute that audience.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so it really is just so much more. I've always had this issue when I've talked to you about what do I call you? Like, what are you? When people ask me, Heather, who do you have helping you do the marketing of your book or the launch or whatever? It's like, well, I have this group of people because it's so much more than a creative studio. I mean, you're doing branding, you're doing coaching, you're doing design, along with Trepa, and you have all these different arms. What does the future hold? What does the future hold for Amplify Studio of what you might want to share at this stage?
So Amplify is going to become kind of like a mini universe. We have this coaching element which is really important to us, and we want to do more with entrepreneurs and also with young, colorful women in particular, to help them rise to the next level of themselves. So that's something we're going to be branching out. The studio will remain; it will continue to serve brands and entrepreneurs. That's something that we love doing, and it has a very real world impact, which is very important for us to keep kind of tied into that. We're also going to be launching an academy for brands, entrepreneurs, young women, on the various facets of this business that we have picked up that we feel needs to be shared at a larger level. So that's something that we are going to be doing later in the year. And my personal hope is that Amplify becomes more of a group of brands and a way of life that people can come and interact with at different levels. So if you're an entrepreneur, you come in and you interact within that capacity. If you're a brand, we can help advise your marketing teams on how they can create that deeper level of resonance with their target demographics. And for younger women, I personally would like for younger women to follow our journey and learn some of the things that we've picked up along the way as a group of diverse women who are having to kind of unlearn and decondition a lot of societal norms in order to continue progressing at this pace within the world.
Yeah. And where can people learn more about you? Because I know for a fact many of my colleagues really would like to meet you and talk to you. Where can people best find you? I mean, I know from the start I told you guys I'm not going on TikTok. Don't even ask me. I'm not doing it. But where is your brand? What's the best place to get in touch with you or follow you?
Okay, so our website is www.amplifyuniverse.com. So it's like fairly easy to remember. I would also encourage people to just connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I'm very kind of open to talking to new people. We are quite busy at the moment, so please allow us a grace period, in case we don't respond immediately. But it would be very, very interesting for people to just kind of connect directly. And yeah, as I said, we have a lot going on at the moment, but we're always interested in meeting new brands and entrepreneurs, and very open to connecting, especially where there is that value alignment. So yeah, we look forward
And
to
you're pretty active on Instagram as well, right? With the studio?
Yes. Yeah. We have our Instagram handle is Amplify Creative Studio.
Perfect. Well, Rashina, I said we weren't going to talk more than 30 minutes. We can never keep to time, the two of us, but this is probably the shortest conversation we've ever had. So we did well at about 40 minutes today. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I've been so incredibly impressed and inspired by you, your work, and thank you so much for what you've done for me and my brand and helping me to unmute and have a really successful launch that I know touched the lives of a lot of people. So I owe it to you and your magnificent mind and your team as well. So thank you to all of you. And I hope everybody listening, if you are interested in learning more about Rashina and Amplify Studio and all of the amazing work that they do, that you'll reach out to Rashina and start following them online at the places she mentioned. So thanks so much, Rashina. Thanks for being here.
It is such a huge pleasure.
Yeah, my very first unmuted conversation. So I'm very proud and honored that it was you. So thanks so much. And we'll be back. I don't know when. We will be having some kind of schedule around these unmuted conversations. I do have a plan to bring on other authors and leaders and people who are really change makers, entrepreneurs, authors, thought leaders who are unmuting themselves in the world, who have an unmuted mission. And so if it's something you'd love to have a conversation with me about, I'd love to have you on this new series as well. So thanks again, Rashina, and I'll see everyone next time. Bye.